welcome to the second episode of the Meikles Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing a couple of different subjects. Joining me, as usual, is Heath, and our first subject, I think, will be pantry basics.
Subject that is near and dear to my heart. You know, a pantry that's stocked is good.
Yes. Why don't you go ahead, Heath, and give what you think are in the main part of the pantry, what you think are the staples that are needed.
Well, let me start this out by asking you a question. Now, if you were dropped on a desert island and you could take 3 things for your pantry, what would those 3 things be?
For me, they would be oil, salt, and flour.
All this from the gluten guy.
Gluten-free flour in my case.
Mine definitely would. Number 1 would be salt, because you can't really do anything without salt. Number 2 would be fat, which in my case, I spent many years in Athens, Greece, and you can't do anything without olive oil. And my third one would be a good set of herbs. I need herbs. Because
I'm sure that if I was on a desert island, I'd be tasting the leaves to see which ones tasted good in
your brownies or what?
In my cooking. Yeah, in my brownies.
Let's talk about salt first. What do you use salt for, Shane?
I use salt in just about everything. You use salt even if you're making a dessert, you've got to have salt. I use mainly 3 different kinds of salt in my cooking. You have your basic table salt that you use in a basic recipe or to season stuff.
That'd be your iodized variety that you can buy for $1 at your grocery store.
Right, exactly. But when I'm brining or baking or anything, I like to use either pickling salt or kosher salt.
Which is essentially just larger grain salt that's not been iodized. I use for my stuff.
As well as it dissolves a lot better than table salt.
Correct. And what's your third one?
My third one is I really like pink salt.
Sodium nitrite, right?
Sodium nitrite mixed with salts, and you've got to have that for curing anything to do with meats. It helps keep it. It's what gives sausages and the like that red color.
Yep.
But it is also a preservative. Now, I know before we get a whole bunch of people going, oh, but that's not natural. Actually, it is. Everything in that grows from the earth has some nitrites in it. What you're adding to meats to cure it is less than, let's say, a stalk of celery has in it. That argument doesn't really hold weight.
Well, and to cure, you can use celery powder as well. It has enough nitrites in it to do the same job. So it is occurring naturally, and some people get freaked out about it. Some people have allergies to it, and it exacerbates asthma. But in a general sense, I have allergies and asthma, and I still use nitrites because, unfortunately, I like bacon.
Me too. But like I said, if you take celery juice extract, which is what the all-natural sausages use as their nitrate source, it contains as much, if not more, nitrates than using the proper amount of pink salt when doing a cure.
Right.
So it shouldn't, if it's done right, it should not exacerbate allergies or asthma.
Yeah, but it's the problems come when you get overly nitrated foods like the prepared hams and such at your grocery store. That's why, we got to do it ourselves. We got to think it ourselves.
Exactly.
For me, I use salt pretty much the same way Shane does. I have the good old household variety that comes in, any size that you want for dirt cheap. Believe it or not, I don't use that very much. Most of the salt I use for everyday cooking is just non-iodized sea salt. Usually it's Greek sea salt because I'm biased. But, you can get your French salts, you can get your British salts, you can get your, fancy Spanish salts, and they're awesome. I also use kosher salt for all my recipes for bacon, pancetta, anything like that. I use kosher salt, sausages, all of that. And the third one is the same as Shane, is the nitrite salt. And which leads us to our next thing.
Also called prog powder.
Prog powder, yep. There's 2 different varieties. Particularly in Europe, you can get sodium nitrate, which is prog powder 2, which as you're aging, it converts into nitrites over an extended period of time to help the curing and the aging of hung sausages that haven't been heated at all. Anyway, salt. That's number 1. Number 2 is oil or fat, any type of fat. Traditionally, back in the day, I remember Grandma Meikle, every time I visited, the whole house permeated a bacon smell. And every time I went into the kitchen, I would ask Grandma, what the heck is that? And on the back of her stove, she had a big jar of this white gelatin. It's kind of thick paste stuff. And as a kid, I always wondered, what was it? Well, it was rendered fat. It was bacon fat that she used to cook absolutely everything in. She cooked spaghetti with it. It was awesome. Anyway, so your fats come in different shapes and sizes. Now,
and I use 90% beef tallow which
is what?
Fat.
Explain to somebody who doesn't know what beef tallow is, or only buys.
It's rendered beef suet, which is the fat off the
so
cow.
you buy it. Then how do you process it to make it usable?
Well, if they go on the website, they can. I've got complete instructions on rendering it. But in basic, you grind it up, put it in the oven. The oils will separate from what's called the cracklins. And the cracklins are wonderful in and of themselves. You then take and strain off the fat, refrigerate it, and you're left with this really nice white fat. It's good for just about anything. It's got a slightly beefy taste to it, but I use it from anything from pastries to mixing with butter on my popcorn. I love the stuff. Contrary to popular belief, it is not artery hardening as long as it's pure, unadulterated tallow.
Look, you look on the side of, like if you buy your margarine, hydrogenated vegetable oil, the list is like 8 million miles long. I'm kind of the opinion that you keep the list short and you use stuff in moderation, and you're not going to have problems.
Right, but you get that same tallow that has been taken and processed into something like a Crisco type fat, and I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole because, like you said, it's got a list 10 miles long.
It's got stabilizers and emulsifiers and everything else in there.
And they've whipped it so fine. It's the same process basically as homogenizing, where they can whip it so fine that the fat molecules become really small, and then they have a tendency, and it holds its shape then, it becomes whippable, but it also will go right through the walls of your artery and build up as plaque in your artery. So no, I won't use that stuff.
It's the same thing as I use mostly olive oil in my kitchen. Like I said, spending time in Greece. Life is a sad day when I run out of olive oil in my kitchen. But, I buy virgin olive oil for general cooking. I cook eggs in olive oil, for crying out loud.
That's where my bacon fat gets reserved for.
So
that's Grandma Meikle taught me that one.
And then I have extra virgin olive oil, or really finer flavored olive oils, single vintage olive oils for salads and the like. Depending on region, it's fun to experiment, to figure out what olive oils, depending on what variety of olive and what area they are grown in, it has completely different taste. It's amazing. Particularly, when I am in Greece, my favorite was from Chania in Crete. It was they used wild olives. And so it was almost the color of really dark green when you poured it, and it had such a wonderful, intense flavor. Now, to cook with that...
I have some of that from Syria that's like that, and I love this.
Yeah, the wild olives, because they're about half the size of a regular olive, so it takes a lot more of them, and the flavors are all concentrated. It's amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. So, we use olive oil, we use tallow. What if somebody, is on a limited budget, or they don't have access to any of this? What sort of regular cooking oil would you suggest, Shane? What do you use?
If I'm using a regular vegetable-based oil, I use either peanut oil or sunflower oil. Sunflower oil is not that expensive. But it's a good all-around oil.
Yeah, it has no flavor to it, so I use that if I'm making like baking powder biscuits or any other cooking. I use just non-aromatic, non-flavored oil for that. Or I use coconut oil. I use a fair bit of coconut oil.
I use some coconut oil when I'm doing soap making, but I don't use it much in cooking. I use coconut milk a lot in cooking. But the oil itself, I reserve for soap making. Now, if you had, let's say, 3 other things that you could add 3 more things to your desert island stash, what would they be?
Okay. First of all, probably some type of dried pepper. Ancho chilies, chipotles, I love them. And I would probably have to take, what do I use? Probably porcini mushrooms, to be honest. I love
my mushrooms too. I didn't even put that on my list, but it might get it onto that list. You probably know, well as Heath knows, I am a mushroom fanatic.
Yeah, our trip, as we said last time, we were drying mushrooms in the hotel room. Tried that in Paris. Was a little bit different experience. I was in Paris last year, and my wife and I had this fancy little room, and yeah, let's just say the morels didn't dry very well, and it smelled like somebody used the toilet whenever I walked in there. I'm sure the maid didn't like that too much. But so, if you're going to dry mushrooms, make sure you have the right environment.
Or a blow dryer that you can finish them off with.
That works.
Now, my 3 things would be, I'd have to have garlic powder, onion powder, and, believe it or not, soy sauce.
Okay, well, that would be a pass on my list, but yeah, I was going to say garlic and onions are pretty much the fresh variety. I'm not really a fan of powders, but and that just comes from being in a Greek country where you had everything readily available at any time, whenever you wanted. So,
but you'll find that when we get to the fresh vegetables that I'd want, staples, that you'll find them on that list as well. But when I'm doing dry rubs, anything like that, gotta have my garlic powder, gotta have my onion powder in my dry rubs. They're a staple in a dry rub. They're an absolute necessity. And soy sauce, to me, is a miracle cure. You can turn, without it tasting soy saucy, you can turn a gravy into a really savory gravy. Used in the right quantity, it's kind of like, it's a flavor enhancer when used properly. It just makes everything snap.
There you go. I don't know. I have one more. Yeah, I would have to say, as far as essentials, yeah, flour on your list it would be on my second list. Definitely a type of flour, because, whether you're frying something and you want to dredge it in flour, whether you want to, anything like that, you need flour. And, I'm not gluten intolerant at all, so regular, good old-fashioned white flour is great for me. Yeah, I know probably some people are going to freak out because I said white flour, but general purpose, non-refined.
But you didn't say bleached white flour.
Oh no, I avoid that. I just have regular unbleached flour.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I use it because flour. I have a sourdough starter that I've kept alive for a few years here, and yeah, it has a regular diet of flour, and it doesn't seem to be bothered. It's not even it gets fatter now and again, but that's okay. That was my failed attempt at humor for this morning.
Anyways, well, if you look on the website again, you can see my gluten-free flour mix, and like I say on the website, it is a good all-purpose flour. But don't try baking bread with it. If I wasn't gluten intolerant, I would also want to have some bread flour on my list, but since I can't have it,
you can't have it. So
I can't have it. But for doing things like baking biscuits or pancakes, any of the quick breads of that nature, my flour works really good for dredging, gravies, you name it, that type of thing, and it's a must in my pantry.
So on the website, I'll be posting a general all-purpose recipe for bacon, and that'll be simple as pie. And I will be posting a sourdough starter or recipe so that you can use your flour and water and create some amazing bread. So
okay, now for your vegetables.
Oh, vegetables. Yeah, I guess we could talk about vegetables. Well, of course, for me.
What are your 4 staple veg?
4
that have to be in your pantry.
Vegetables or just regular pantry items? Because
fresh pantry items, okay. If you want to
fresh
put it
pantry
that way.
Items probably would be potatoes, number 1.
That's number 1 on my list.
Yams,
too.
I love yams. Not sweet potatoes, the pinky, the orange ones, not the white ones. Everybody gets those confused. And probably carrots. I love carrots. I use them in everything.
Okay, well that's 3. What's your 4th?
Oh, okay. Now I'll put 5. Garlic and onions. If you have carrots, potatoes, garlic, and onions, you can pretty much combine them in so many different ways to create anything. So those would be mine.
Okay, well mine are similar but a little bit different. One thing different. Potatoes, of course, number 1. Onions, carrots, garlic, and the one that differs is celery. Celery is a must in my kitchen.
Yeah, I could take it or leave it with celery, but it is essential in certain, like for instance, last night I did a beautiful braised chicken, and it needs celery in it, so I added celery.
Yeah, well, that's the difference between you're being spending all your time in Greece and me having my love with Cajun food. You can't have Cajun food without celery.
I was forgetting the most important thing. I'm crazy. You need, on the top of my list, at the top before even potatoes, Actually, lemons are a key ingredient for me. If I have lemon, oregano, and salt, I'm like in heaven right there.
See, I prefer to get my acids from a vinegar. I like my vinegars. I've got probably 20 different kinds of vinegars in my pantry. I use lemon juice a little bit, but I'm not all hung up like a lot of people are on lemons. I'm not a big lemon fan.
Yeah, I use the juice, and I have a rasp. Then I take off the outer rind on it, and it adds zip to just about everything.
I love the zest. Don't get me wrong. I actually prefer lime zest. Actually, I like lime zest. It adds a lot to it, but the juice and the length, I'm not a huge fan of the juices. I can take them or leave them. Like I said, I like to get mine from vinegar, my acidity. And I guess that should have been on my top list. I should have had vinegar or something.
Yeah, it's funny. We should have, it's funny when you get started talking about it, I'm like, oh, yeah, what about this? Oh, yeah, what about this? Our pantries are growing by our desert island is getting bigger and bigger, so we're going to have to cut down a few logs and
build a huge pantry. And since we like all of the stuff that's got to be resupplied, so we'll have to build a dock so boats can get in to resupply
us. Absolutely. So it leads us to, maybe, I don't know, you want to finish out this episode talking about the pantry, or do you want to start on shop tools? Because once we get on shop tools, we can start rolling. But I think we need to talk maybe about other starches, other things in our pantry that are essential.
Yeah, well, I think that this episode is going to end up being all this. That we can make the next episode strictly on the shop.
Perfect. I use a lot of rice as well. Part of that is living, in the Mediterranean. And I know it sounds odd, but the Mediterraneans, like you look at the Italians, you look at the Greeks, and the Mediterraneans use a lot of rice. So I'd say there's 3 types of rices that I have in my pantry at every moment. One is good old Indian basmati rice. I love the aromatic, the wonderful flavor with butter and saffron of basmati rice. It's amazing. The second rice that I have is arborio rice, Italian, short grain, very starchy. I make wonderful risottos with it, but I also use that as well for paella. I love the Spanish on a carbon pan over the stove. It's amazing, and I mix it up, and I probably have every Spanish guy cringing at my pronunciation and the way I use it, but that's okay. I love it. And the third rice is just good old, as the Greeks call it, American rice, parboiled rice. I use that in soups and other stuff that don't need the delicate flavor of either of the arborio or the basmati. So, do you have any specific rices that you use, or what do you use, Shane?
I use 2 of them that you have, the arborio and the parboiled. I'm not a huge fan of basmati. I like there's a couple of other long grains out there that I prefer.
Yeah, there's jasmine, and there's a few other ones, and those are great, and I have them on occasion in my pantry, but those aren't the ones that I have every day myself.
Yeah, I like to use, when I'm making a fried rice, I like to use some of the Asian long grains rather than the Indian long grains. I find that they absorb the flavors a little bit nicer to me, in my way of thinking, than the basmati does.
Basmati has just such a unique flavor than aromatics that it's hard to disguise it if you want it to taste like something else.
Yeah, if you're doing a fried rice, it doesn't work real well in the fried rice. But basically, it's the same thing. It's 3 different kinds of rice, 3 different lengths of rice, and it's within that family. We're very similar. A very long grain rice, which is your basmati or your jasmine or something of that nature. Then you've got your regular, as you called it, American rice, which is a medium length rice. Then you've got your short grains, arborio.
Or your
I also like
sushi rice is in there, the rice that they use.
Sushi rice, I was just going to say that. I like the sushi rice as well. If I can't get arborio, I'll use my sushi rice.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just the amount of starches in the hulls. It's kind of funny. I was never a proponent of rice makers. It's kind of interesting. And this relates maybe to a different post on tools, but a while ago I got for free a rice cooker, and I thought, really, am I going to use that? Because I'm used to working with refugees and with a lot of Iranians. They boil their rice like you boil pasta. They drain it off, and then they add oil in the bottom of their pan, and then they steam it to remove the excess moisture, and that's how they cook their basmati. And so I thought, I don't need a rice cooker. Well, now that I have one, I cook every kind of rice in there all the time, except for the risottos and such. But never thought. It's an amazing tool. So if you get a chance, there's a free plug for you. Rice cookers are pretty amazing little tools.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of rice cookers, and I have been known to use them, but I'm not. I never get around to using it, so I just pull it out and do the standard. Because you got to do it anyways. If you're going to do long grain rice, anything but risotto, you want to wash your rice. You want to make sure that the water is coming clear before you ever cook it.
Yeah.
So
let her soak and let her rinse, and
then
it's almost like a ritual what they do with it. It's pretty amazing to see.
I don't really have a problem with burning the rice or anything when I cook it on the stove. Two cups. Once I've got it good and washed, 2 cups of liquid to every cup of rice, and you're good to go.
I like it because the speed of the rice cooker, like I said, I've never been a proponent before, but it's 1-to-1 ratio on that. And I thought, really? You don't need more water? Because, I was taught 2-to-1, 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 right? But 1-to-1, boom, done in short order. And it's perfect fluffy rice every time. So, anyway, free plug.
I actually use my rice cooker for other things.
Yeah, I do too as well, but...
I steam meats in it. I do anything like that. No, if you like a rice cooker, I have no problem with. I guess I'm too lazy to pull it out when I want to cook rice.
So to kind of finish off this episode, we got another few minutes left. What else is in your pantry? What's the surprising thing in your pantry that nobody would guess?
I would have to think for a second. Just give me a second.
Yeah, of course I caught you off guard. What I have in mind, I've got a whole selection
brown
of canned
sugar.
goods. Brown sugar? Oh yeah, I have brown sugar in mine. I use that in everything from bacon to coffee to any type of baking. I use brown sugar.
Well, brown sugar is a must in any meat rub. White sugar just doesn't cut it when you're making a rub.
As far as for me, the other surprise ingredient that I use quite a bit that would surprise maybe a few people is that a good bottle of bourbon on hand in your cupboard works great. I use it for glazes, for marinades, for something where I might not add as much brown sugar, but I'd add some bourbon to give the kind of the sweet component into stuff, and it just gives a nice smoky flavor.
See, in my case, it's rum. I have a bottle of rum in there. I actually have a bottle of rum and a bottle of maple bourbon. Those are my 2 cooking liquors that I use a lot of. They add a depth to whatever you're cooking.
Yep,
that
absolutely.
You just wouldn't get. And there's no alcohol there once it's cooked. It's just the depth of the flavor. They help to enhance any spices or anything else you've added to it. It's like if I'm roasting a chicken, I like to fill the cavity with a can of beer.
Yep.
For the same reason. It steams it from the inside and adds a nuttiness to it.
And it sometimes can add a level of bitterness, a good bitterness to it if you're using like an IPA or something with lots of hops in it. It's great. It really does a great job.
And of course, mine is gluten-free beer.
Well, there's a Greek word for that, and it's called anathema, but that's okay. We won't go there. I'm kind of a beer purist, so... But it tasted all right. I have tasted.
Well, I've actually found some that are even better now.
Well, that's good. It's good.
I'm going to give a plug to a brand made right here in Western Canada. Boxer Beer makes an excellent gluten-free beer for those of us that can't have the regular beer. And if you try their regular brand or their regular line and next to their gluten-free, I don't think you could tell the difference.
There you go. Plug of the day. So, one other thing that I hadn't mentioned that I do cook a lot of is pasta. And I know you're limited with your gluten issues. But,
actually, I'm not so limited anymore, and I do a lot of pasta.
Yeah, because you can get some good corn pasta, and I don't know, do you use rice pasta at all?
I don't like rice pasta. I don't. If it's a blend with corn, it's not so bad, but I really like my corn pastas. I have a lot of people that are not gluten insensitive that once they taste some of the corn pastas out there, they actually, in fact, a few Italians preferred them over the normal pasta. There are some really good corn pastas out there, and they're cheap now. Believe it or not, you can go to Walmart, get their store brand gluten-free pasta now, and it is as cheap as their other store brands. So that's one thing that gluten-free, we're getting to have a lot more options in the mainstream anymore. In some ways, that's a good thing. In other ways, it's not so good because you also have a lot of people that's go, oh, it's just a fad. You just don't want the gluten because it's a fad. Believe me, if I didn't have to be gluten-free, I wouldn't be.
So I generally have a good supply. I have got a couple of different shapes that I keep on hand all the time. I have a good spaghetti, I have a good rigatoni, and farfalle, the bow ties. I use that in a salsa verde recipe that's amazing. So I keep a selection of dried pastas on hand, but I also, my favorite is to use good old-fashioned eggs and flour and make handmade myself with other flavorings into it. I also make a lot of gnocchi, either from potatoes or from sweet potatoes or yams. I do a lot of that as well. You just, you rice them and put them in flour and a little bit of egg and you boil them. Tastes great with the tomato sauce. And so I think that covers pretty much the pantry. Anything else you want to add?
No. Did you have any closing thoughts?
No, just other than the fact that we've mentioned a couple recipes like bacon and sourdough, and maybe I might throw a gnocchi recipe out there. But anyway, yeah, check out the website madmeikles.com.
And I'm going to be putting a Spätzle recipe up there. That's one of my favorite
Spetzel's great.
things.
Love Spätzle.